Oh, this is fascinating. You felt it, didn't you? Look who just realized what's been happening. Hello to the one they thought would crumble. The spirit they assumed would break when they sent their greatest challenge. That impossible obstacle. That perfectly designed test wearing the face of absolute disaster. Hello to you. Because something extraordinary just occurred, hasn't it? Something they never anticipated, never accounted for, never imagined possible, even though they orchestrated this entire scenario for weeks, perhaps months, mapping your reactions, studying your limits, identifying your breaking points. And then they unleashed their master plan, the crisis, the catastrophe, the situation that seemed designed to destroy everything you'd built. Before we go further, if this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what test you're facing right now. This channel exists for the ones who refuse to break, and I need to know you're out there. They engineered this disaster to appear in your world, in your timeline, in your reality, with one clear objective: stop you, break you, make you forget the power you've been cultivating, make you question your path, your vision, your transformation. They wanted you paralyzed by fear, consumed by doubt, scrambling to survive, while your dreams dissolved into desperate emergency mode and your evolution reversed into mere survival. But here's the element that has them in complete chaos right now. Here's the component that's making their architects work overtime, trying to comprehend what actually went catastrophically wrong with their design. You didn't just survive it. No. You did something far more devastating to their strategy. You weaponized it. You alchemized the entire experience. You took everything they designed as destruction and converted it into transformation. And now there's not just one version of you walking through this world with that unbreakable foundation, that untouchable resonance, that lethal awareness. Now there's something else entirely, because that crisis they engineered, that perfectly constructed breakdown, that test they weaponized against your evolution. Yeah, it upgraded you. You stared into that abyss, and instead of falling into their manufactured chaos, instead of succeeding in their objective to keep you powerless, you extracted the lesson. You harvested the wisdom. You claimed your authority. And something inside you that had been dormant for lifetimes suddenly activated into a frequency they have no defense against. Surprise. Did they not account for that possibility? Did they not consider that pressure creates diamonds? That their chaos might forge precision? That their attempt to destroy you might reconstruct you into something indestructible? Let's examine what actually transpired here, because this is where it becomes beautifully ironic. They observed you for so long, documenting your transformation, measuring your expansion, calculating your increasing resistance to their standard operations. You stopped accepting their limitations, stopped believing their narratives, stopped seeking permission from systems designed to keep you regulated, so they had to escalate. They had to deploy something you wouldn't recognize as a test, something that would breach your defenses, wearing the mask of genuine catastrophe itself. They orchestrated a situation, or maybe they manifested a crisis, or maybe they just triggered a collapse that had been circling your existence, waiting for activation. Something that matched your fear frequency just enough to feel real. Something that carried just enough threat to seem fatal. Just enough chaos to feel insurmountable. Something that would test every limit you thought you had, every boundary you believed was solid, every foundation you assumed was unshakable. This crisis materialized in your life with surgical precision, right when you were beginning to construct something they couldn't infiltrate, right when you were starting to remember something they needed you to suppress, right when your frequency was becoming too elevated, too focused, too threatening to their investment in your limitation. And initially, maybe it worked partially. Maybe you did experience panic. Maybe you did spend hours calculating worst-case scenarios, analyzing every angle, questioning if this was finally it, the end, the collapse that would validate all the fear, all the doubt, all the nights spent wondering if you were delusional to believe you could transcend their system. And they observed. Oh, they observed with satisfaction. Look at them, finally destabilized, finally responding to trauma instead of responding to purpose, finally broken, finally manageable, finally small enough to contain within the prison we constructed for their potential. But that's the miscalculation about using pressure against someone forged in pressure. That's the error about deploying crisis as ammunition against someone who was born in crisis. That's the flaw about trying to break a phoenix by setting everything on fire. Sometimes they don't burn to ash. Sometimes they remember what they are. Sometimes they become something your limited perspective couldn't possibly engineer. Something exponentially more evolved than the version you tried to destroy. See, while they assumed you were collapsing in survival mode, you were actually executing something else entirely. You were observing, calculating, integrating, documenting everything. You were treating this crisis like intelligence, like masterclass material, like an initiation specifically designed for your ascension. You examined this situation, and instead of losing your center, you found your core. You witnessed your patterns under ultimate pressure. You discovered your capacity in high stakes. You recognized your power when everything seemed powerless. And instead of making you desperate, it made you dangerous. Dangerous, because if you can transmute this level of chaos into clarity, then you're not fragile, you're not breakable, you're not too sensitive. You're just calibrated differently. You're just operating on a frequency most people won't access because they quit when the test gets real. And something shifted, something crystallized. Something in you declared, this isn't destroying me, this is revealing me. This isn't happening to me. This is happening through me. And the moment you transformed your perception from victim to alchemist, from reactive to responsive, from attached to observant, that's when their design started disintegrating. See, they required you to surrender to this crisis. They required you defeated, traumatized, willing to abandon your vision for a return to false safety. But you didn't. You looked at this supposed catastrophe and you said, intense, challenging, unprecedented. Yes, but I came here for something more significant than survival. I came here with a blueprint that doesn't get abandoned just because reality tests its validity. I came here to build something that survives crisis, that transcends chaos, that doesn't require perfect conditions to validate its existence. And when you maintained your vision, when you kept your frequency elevated, when you refused to make this crisis your new identity, something unexpected manifested. The situation started revealing its purpose. The test started showing its design. The crisis started teaching instead of destroying. You looked at the pressure and something in you said, wait, what? How am I not collapsing? How am I not regressing? How am I not sacrificing everything I've built just to escape this discomfort? Like I've watched everyone else do, like I've been conditioned to expect, like I've been programmed to execute. And here's where it becomes even more profound. You started asking different questions. Questions you weren't supposed to formulate. Why did this appear now? Who benefits from me being destabilized? Why does this feel like there's a script I'm supposed to follow? And what happens if I don't follow it? Why do I feel more awake during this crisis instead of more unconscious like I was promised would happen? Why does this pressure make me want my own power instead of making me want to escape, hide, return to comfortable slavery? You started perceiving the design, started feeling the manipulation, started recognizing the architecture behind your own programming. And instead of completing their mission to break you, you broke through. You transcended. You looked at the ones who engineered this and said, "Actually, no, I'm not collapsing anymore. I'm not playing this role anymore. I see what you're attempting to accomplish, and I'm choosing evolution over comfort. I'm choosing truth over safety. I'm choosing my own transformation over your containment." So now you're walking around uncontainable, operating outside their predicted algorithms, carrying that frequency that makes their systems malfunction. And that's not just one evolved soul they have to monitor, strategize around, attempt to regulate. That's a blueprint. And one person who refuses to break during the breaking point. One person who transmutes crisis into catalyst. One person who sees through the test and uses it for Shang-Chi. That's not just survival. That's evolution. That's exponential threat level. That's reality restructuring potential they absolutely cannot permit. But it's already done, isn't it? Because while they were busy congratulating themselves on the perfect destruction operation, you were busy converting their weapon into your tool, their trap into your training, their carefully engineered collapse into the exact initiation you needed to evolve into a version of yourself they have no protocols for. Let me tell you what they're confronting now. They're not just monitoring one anomaly anymore. They're tracking a glitch in the matrix who took their greatest test and emerged transformed. They're watching someone who was supposed to be drowning in trauma, paralyzed by fear, sacrificing their purpose for survival. But instead, they're watching someone building stronger than before. Someone holding themselves accountable to the vision. Someone who looks at the crisis and says, "You will not make me smaller. You will not make me forget who I am. You will not become my excuse to abandon my path. Because you're not here to destroy me. You're here to forge me." They sent a test and accidentally created a testimony. They sent destruction and accidentally built determination. They sent fear and accidentally forged fearlessness. And now they're recalculating. You know what the most ironic part is? They actually believed their own illusion. They actually thought crisis was a weakness trigger. They actually believed pressure would make you smaller. They never considered that someone awakened enough wouldn't collapse under testing, they would crystallize. They never calculated that you might see through their tactic and alchemize it against them. They never prepared for the possibility that their own weapon would become your evidence of indestructibility. And now they're trapped watching the exact inverse of what they intended unfold in real time. They're watching you become more focused, more powerful, more dangerous to their systems, and they're watching others witness what you did, how you transmuted chaos into clarity, how you refused to let crisis define you, asking questions, seeing patterns, refusing to participate in the programs they used to run unconsciously, connecting dots they were never supposed to connect. And all because they witnessed your fire during the flood. And instead of drowning, you walked on water. Here's what they didn't understand about you. Here's what they miscalculated in their assessment. You were never seeking rescue. You were never searching for safety. You were never fragile enough to abandon yourself for comfort, no matter how brutal the test felt. You came here whole. You came here with a mission. You came here knowing that nothing, not crisis, not chaos, not the most devastating test in the universe, was worth abandoning your purpose for. And when they sent a situation designed to break you, thinking it would knock you unconscious, you just absorbed the pressure, integrated the wisdom, and kept walking toward your vision. Except now you weren't walking tentatively. Now you were walking with the evidence that nothing they send can stop you, that every test reveals more of your capacity, that their attempts to destroy you only verify your indestructibility. So what happens now? What happens when someone who was supposed to be broken by the test emerges as proof that the test doesn't break you, it builds you? What happens when the crisis trap becomes a crisis catalyst? What happens when their carefully crafted destruction strategy backfires so magnificently that it creates exactly what they feared most? One awakened soul moving with evidence, immune to their games, dangerous to their timelines, capable of showing others what's possible when you refuse to let crisis define your destiny. I'll tell you what happens. Reality starts responding to you differently. Doors that were locked start opening. People who were sent to block you start becoming irrelevant. Systems that were designed to contain you start glitching in your presence. Because now, you're not just surviving their tests, you're using them. And one frequency that transmutes chaos into clarity doesn't just exist. It disrupts everything. It generates new possibilities. It opens portals that weren't accessible to the untested. And the ones who sent this crisis, they're in emergency analysis right now. They're reviewing data, studying outcomes, trying to comprehend how their perfect test became their perfect failure. How did this happen? How did we lose control of the narrative? How did our target not just survive the crisis, but use it as transformation? How are they more powerful now than before we intervened? How do we destabilize them without making them more aware? How do we contain this before it becomes contagious? Before other people see what's possible? Before this becomes a blueprint? Because if people figure out that they can take our tests and turn them into testimonies, if they figure out that our crises can become their catalysts, if they figure out that what we send to destroy them can actually forge them stronger, we lose everything. The whole system collapses. The entire game is over. But it's already over for that now, isn't it? You already figured it out. You already integrated the wisdom. You already showed everyone watching what's possible when you refuse to break. And now they're learning. And those learners are waking up. And those awakened ones are asking questions. And the whole carefully constructed system of control is starting to unravel because one person refused to play their assigned role, because one person looked at a designed catastrophe and said, "Actually, I'm going to use this for my evolution instead," because one person had the audacity to turn a test into a testimony, a weapon into a tool, a manipulation into a masterclass. Let's go deeper into what this signifies. Let's discuss the mechanics of what just transpired, because this isn't just a personal victory. This is a fracture in their entire architecture. See, their whole operation relies on fragility, on keeping awakened souls convinced they're breakable, on making sure that when crisis hits, people either collapse into trauma or regress into survival mode. They can't allow someone to see crisis as catalyst. They can't allow someone to use pressure as evolution. They can't allow someone who sees through the illusion to emerge stronger, because that's how evidence spreads. That's how systems change. That's how new realities get built. One person showing another person what's possible. Two people showing 10, 10 showing 100. Exponential awakening that spreads faster than they can contain it. So they send crises as tests, as breakdowns, as catastrophes, designed to keep you spinning in survival mode instead of building your vision. But you didn't spin. You didn't regress. You didn't abandon your path. You looked at this crisis and said, "Intense. Yes. Challenging. Absolutely worth respecting. Maybe worth abandoning my mission? Never." And that discernment, that sovereignty, that refusal to let crisis become your identity, that's what broke their design. That's what created the blueprint, because others felt your stability, and it reminded them of something they'd forgotten. They saw your clarity under pressure, and it triggered something dormant in them. They witnessed your refusal to break, and it made them question their own programming. Why do I accept that crisis breaks me? What am I really capable of? Whose limitations am I embodying? And the moment those questions surface, the program fails. The victim becomes a victor. The test becomes a testimony. And now you're operating outside their predicted parameters. You're moving in ways they didn't program. You're asking questions they didn't authorize. You're building something they didn't design. And the terrifying part for them is that you're doing it visibly, not hiding, not in secret chaos, but as evidence that their tests don't work anymore. That you've chosen to witness your own evolution, that you've chosen to hold yourself accountable to the highest version of the mission. That's the nightmare scenario they never prepared for. Someone who loves themselves enough to not become the crisis's victim. Someone who is connected enough to their purpose to let pressure amplify clarity. Someone who sees their power during the test and says, yes, more of that. Become that. I'm not here to survive you. I'm here to use you until I can't unsee what I'm capable of anymore. You want to know why this backfired so spectacularly? Because they underestimated you. They thought you were still operating from the old paradigm, the one where crisis means collapse, where pressure means regression, where testing means breaking. They thought they could engineer the perfect disaster and you'd abandon everything. Sacrifice your mission, forget your purpose, make survival your new obsession, your new meaning, your new reason for existing. But you're not operating from that paradigm anymore. You evolved past it. You integrated the lesson that nothing outside you destroys you. That no crisis, no matter how catastrophic, is worth abandoning your sovereignty for. That real power, real evolution, real transformation doesn't avoid the test. It uses the test. And when they sent a situation designed to break you, you didn't collapse under that pressure. You crystallized from it instead.